The strongest army in the world can take a blow it can't recover from. More dangerous than an aircraft carrier is the weapon that can sink it deep into the sea. That's not just another Khamenei line, it's a direct threat aimed at America's soft underbelly. Or is it? The symbol, the aircraft carrier. And it's not random that he said it on the exact day the Geneva talks ended, and the exact day Iran played with the world's faucet, the Straits of Hormuz. Now, today's topic is simple. Is there a deal here that can hold? Or is this a bluff and we're one step away from the United States and Israel applying real force? And the sharp question, the urgent question, if Iran is willing to talk only about nuclear issues, while the US and Israel want missiles and proxies too, who breaks first and when does this explode? I'm Mati Shoshani, this is the Ground Report, and today I want to talk to you a little differently. Not like a studio show, more like a friend who sits down and says, come on guys, let me make more sense, because this is one story and it's moving very fast. And I want to ask one thing today, very clearly, very succinctly, how Iran is running a double game. Diplomacy on the one hand and muscle in the other. We will give you a real power picture, where the Americans are positioned, where the aircraft carriers are, and what Israel does when everyone understands that time is short. I want to give you one concept, just one, and then everything clicks into place. It's called coercive diplomacy. It means you don't wait for the other side to come around. You open a short window, you set a deadline, and you stand behind it with real power. So you can move to the next stage if needed. The talk becomes talk with a gun on the table. And when people talk about Trump's deadline, a month, as he states, and then a second stage, that'll be very hard. That's not a nice quote, it's a pressure mechanism. And the message to the other side is, you have a short time window, and if not, we're already ready. Now before we continue, I want to place you on the map, because without that, this whole story feels like a headline noise, and it's a lot more than that. Think of it like a boxing path. There's an arena, there's distance, and there's one friction point everyone keeps circling around and around and around. That point is the Strait of Hormuz is the narrow opening that connects the Persian Gulf to the open sea. On one side, Iran. On the other side, Oman and the Emirates. Everything that leaves the Gulf, the oil, the gas, the massive ships, it all goes through there. And from there, it opens into the Gulf of Oman and then the Arabian Sea. Now I'll expand for a second, just 1 second, but without pulling you out of the story. Now why does this matter? Because when the Hormuz moves, the world feels it. You don't need a war. A threat is sufficient. A temporary closure is sufficient. A safety drill is enough. And that's exactly what we had just last week. That's why Iran likes to play in that playground. It's a place where it can touch the global economy without firing a single shot. Now, one more small thing. The Arabian Sea off Oman's coast is where the Americans like to sit with an aircraft carrier. Not inside the closed Gulf. More open water, more room to maneuver, more layers of defense. And that's exactly the space Khamenei is aiming at with his threat. I'm going to take you through this, the way my day actually looked, one update after another, chronologically speaking, and it all builds into one picture. So first of all, in Geneva, another round of talks between the United States and Iran ended after just a few hours. Now the format is an indirect negotiation. Omani mediation, closed rooms. From the Iranian side, one statement comes out. We reached basic understandings. Both sides will work on possible agreement documents. The road has been paved. On the American side, at this stage, there's no official response confirming that description. So this matters. It's still not settled. Now comes Iran's red line, and it repeats again and again in the same language. Missiles and proxies, not on the table. Iran says it plainly. Regional issues and the missile program are not part of the agenda. And then they add the line that explains everything. Iran is ready for dialogue, but not for surrender. And this means we'll talk, but we won't give up what holds the regime in place, what really builds our power. And while they say dialogue, they make a move in the Hormuz Straits. So Iran has been reporting that parts of the strait will be closed for just a few hours as part of a naval drill by the Revolutionary Guard, or the IRGC. They call it a safety precaution, but the timing is absolutely the message in this case, because it happens on the exact day of the Geneva talks. And above all, Khamenei delivers the threat against aircraft carriers. That message ties two things together: the negotiations and power. He's telling the Americans, don't assume your naval presence is untouchable. And he's telling the region, if there's a strike, we have an answer. Now, on the American side, at the same time, there's also a clear message. Trump says he's involved indirectly and that Iran really wants a deal. But he also talks about consequences if there is no deal.
They better negotiate a fair deal. You know, the people of Iran are a lot different than the leaders.
And in reporting, it's written that the United States is preparing for the possibility of weeks of operational activity, if the president orders an attack, of course. And this all means this isn't just a warning, it's a posture that builds up an option and puts it on the table. A new year has begun, and with it comes a renewed opportunity to make a real difference in the land of Israel.
The Rebuild Israel campaign is back, and this Tu B'Shvat, we are planting something powerful, an apple orchard in Israel's north, near the border with Lebanon.
But this isn't just about trees, it's about healing a wounded land.
Every tree planted brings new strength, it creates jobs, restores agriculture, and sends a clear message: the people of Israel are not giving up. Your support makes this possible. Your donations go directly to planting these trees.
Each tree is a symbol of hope, a symbol of faith, and your part in this mission leaves a lasting impact for generations to come. Plant a tree, restore the land, and build the future.
Go to www.tbn.org/rebuildisrael and be part of this mission, one tree at a time.
I'm going to try to break this down into three simple talking points. Let's talk about the double game that the Iranians are playing. This is how Iran is trying to buy time without looking weak. The Iranians entered these talks with a real need. It's a pressured economy, under sanctions, with internal pressure, and it needs oxygen, and it needs it bad. But the regime can't afford an image of surrender, especially not in front of its own people, especially not in front of its proxies across the region. So it does something smart, at least in my mind, from its own perspective. On the one hand, it talks about understandings, about a draft, about a window of opportunity. And on the other hand, it publicly says no missiles, no proxies, meaning, well, it tries to reach an agreement that stays inside of nuclear only and gets sanctions relief without dismantling their real deterrence. Now, this is the key. This is the key for everything. For the Iranian regime, missiles and proxies are not a side issue. They're the pillar that lets it stand up to the US and to Israel. So when the Americans want to expand the talks, Iran pushes back. Now, this is not a technical dispute. It's a regime survival question. Here's the second point: why the Straits of Hormuz and the aircraft carrier threat are the exact same tool. So watch what Iran is doing very carefully. They don't reveal everything about its missile force. They don't detail, they send big messages, they send threats, and it leaves a fog of what they're actually planning to do. Because the fog is part of their deterrence system. If you don't know exactly what I have, you have to think twice. And Hormuz is the place where Iran knows how to create that fog that everybody feels. A temporary closure, a drill, a safety notice, and it's enough to remind the world we're sitting next to the faucet. Now understand Khamenei's threat against an aircraft carrier. He doesn't have to prove something tomorrow morning. He only needs to force the Americans to ask themselves, what is the price? What's the risk? Can this spiral? And that's exactly what coercive diplomacy does, only in reverse. America threatens force to get a deal. Iran threatens risk to get better terms. Now let's talk about the third part, the power picture. Who's where and why this feels like a short window. Now we get to the juicy part, the names, the places, and what it all means. Let's start at sea. The aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln is already in the region. It's there, but it's not telling the world exactly where. And what is an aircraft carrier in practice? It's a floating airbase. Then comes the second player. There are reports about sending the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford to the Middle East to reinforce. And that isn't one more piece. It's a message. There's an additional layer. We're not here for a short spin. Now the air. There's also mention of additional air assets in the region. And there's also talk about the presence of advanced aircraft in the area. But exact numbers and open information are not always settled, so I'm not locking that as a fixed number. Above that, there's an intelligence and coordination layer that glues everything together. It means you see far, you understand movement, and you connect forces in real time. And now the defense layer, and it tells a story all by itself. When you reinforce air defense, you're signaling you expect missile retaliation. You're not only threatening, you're preparing to absorb and keep going. And of course, there are bases on the ground, so you can picture it in your head and not just hear the names. These are the repeating hubs in the region: Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait. This isn't a small reinforcement. It's a posture that can sustain diplomatic pressure and also move a stage if the deadline breaks. Now, Iran from the inside, it's taken over by protest and repression. And here's why I want to be precise. Because you asked for the truth, not slogans. There are very hard descriptions of violent repression, of arrests and executions in the recent period in Iran. There are also numbers floating out there, but a clear number, an exact number of what's happening on the ground simply isn't available. Here's the big thing. We don't know the exact numbers of what's happening on the ground in Iran, and that's no coincidence. The Iranian regime doesn't want the world to know how many people it's eliminated of its own population, but they do want people to know that the threat is out there. We've heard claims from opposition forces, from the US government, in the tens of thousands, while the Iranian regime only claims several thousands. What we do know is that the Iranian regime is fighting against its own people, and it's a bloody and scary fight. So let's talk about Israel now, about the defense, the strike capability, and the fear of proxies. This is where people miss the true picture, because Israel is not waiting to see what happens in Geneva. Israel builds its posture as if this can break at any moment. So here's the first layer, defense. Israel knows that if the talks collapse, the dangerous scenario is an Iranian response, which includes heavy ballistic missiles, all aimed towards Israel. So defense is not a technical detail, it's a condition for survival. The Israeli idea is multiple layers of defense. Reduce as much as possible of what hits the home front and keep room to operate for a counter strike. I'm not going into the how-to, but the principle is very basic. A system that detects early, intercepts across layers, and tries to prevent a situation where the home front is paralyzed, because that's exactly what Iran wants. The second layer is the ability to strike Iran. And here we need to stay and say something very, very simple. Israel has already shown it can operate at depth. In the 12-day war back in June that we talked about, Israel showed an ability to hit Iran in a way that humiliates the regime and shakes its sense of immunity. So when people talk today about preparations, that's not theory. Israel looks at it like an equation. If diplomacy fails, there must be a credible operational option that can hit strategic capabilities, especially missile arrays and command symbols. And again, I'm not going to go into the tactics, but the principle is this. To strike Iran, you need three things. You need reach, you need precision, and you need the ability to come back again and again, in waves if necessary. Now that's the gap between a threat and an actual capability. And the third layer, of course, is the proxies. The most dangerous one, Hezbollah. And here is Israel's fear. Not only Iran, but what happens in parallel, in tandem to that. Because if Iran launches heavy missiles, and at the same time fire opens from Lebanon, from Iraq, from Yemen possibly, from the Houthis, you enter an overload situation. Not because there's no defense, but because of the quantity, the pace, and the simultaneous effect. And the claim inside the Israeli logic is this. The strikes in Lebanon and the elimination are directly connected to preparation for a possible strike in Iran. The goal, under that claim, is to reduce Hezbollah's ability in advance so it can't flood Israel on the day of decision. Hezbollah is the most dangerous proxy means exactly this. It has the volume of fire, it has the range that's nearby, and rockets and missiles that can turn any clash with Iran into a regional war. So if Israel believes the window is closing, it doesn't wait for the proxy to rise. It tries to cut capability ahead of time. So let's ask this question. Do you believe a real deal will come out of this? One that can truly hold? So my answer to that is, first of all, it's complicated. If it's only a nuclear deal, without missiles and without proxies, it can look like an achievement, but break fast in reality. If this helps you make sense of the noise, hit a like, a subscribe, and share this episode. It helps us keep bringing you this ground report. So here's the bottom line. I want to address the premise that is presented here by Khamenei. Khamenei threatens to sink a US carrier. Now I want to tell you something. I just spent the other day several hours on USS Midway, which is a aircraft carrier that's parked in San Diego right now, that was built in the end of World War II and operational through the 80s in the United States Armed Forces. And I want to tell you something. When you see the might of that aircraft carrier, and you see the number of aircrafts that the American forces, the American defense contractors are able to deploy all at once, one thing becomes very, very clear. A country like Iran, who has been unable to develop any technology in a significant way in decades, will not be able to stop the might of a modern aircraft carrier. It simply is not going to happen. When you combine the electronic warfare, when you combine the multiple roles and multiple types of aircraft that are on the aircraft carrier, the strike group that's around it, the full control of both space, intelligence, time, radar systems, and then you factor in the fact of what the US did in Venezuela, how it showcased their ability to completely dismantle both the best of the Russian and the best of the Chinese air defense systems, one thing becomes very, very clear. The idea of the Iranians striking against an American aircraft carrier group is absolute nonsense. They can try, they might get some small drone through, but to sink an aircraft carrier, to actually stop the might of the US Armed Forces as they try to stop the Iranian regime, that's not happening, guys. The US Armed Forces are the strongest army in the world, which is something Khamenei agrees to. But when you look at the technological gap, the manpower training gap, the systemic nature or the systematic approach of the American Armed Forces when they build an army, it's so clear, it's so abundantly obvious. And I got to see this firsthand, just standing on the flight deck here in San Diego, where I'm visiting right now, to see the true might of the American Armed Forces. The Iranians are not stopping that. The Iranians don't have the ability to really make any difference. One comment here, by the way, is I know that Iran is pronounced Iran by the Iranians. We're just speaking American English on this channel, so apologies for the mispronunciation. But really, when I look at this, it's just a question of time. Obviously, the Americans can attack the Iranian regime and not be stopped. The threats that the Iranian regime is making in response, they're not valid. They're useless threats. And my sense is the Iranians are once again buying time, as they've done many times before, to try and prolong, to try and postpone, to try and delay until someone loses focus, attention, and moves on to the next thing. And this has happened and worked for them multiple times in the past. There's one big difference. President Trump didn't come to this term unprepared. He came with a plan. He came with a war cabinet that knows where it's going and the people that know how to put the pressure down on the ground. And that's what we're seeing. I think by this point, the Iranians were expecting the US to back off, to move on to the next topic, to be willing to walk away with some kind of fake agreement or fake negotiation or partial agreement with him. That hasn't happened. And I think they're starting to sweat, and sweat big time, because they know they need an agreement. But the agreement the US is pushing for will be harmful to the Iranian regime, which is the Ayatollah regime, and weaken them both in front of their proxies and internally. And at the same time, the threat of a military strike is so real, is so present, is so valid that they have to negotiate. And they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, or let's put it this way, a US aircraft carrier and the threat of internal pressures. That's really where they are today. And I believe, and this is my personal belief, that we're at a place where finally, somehow, we could lose the Iranian regime. They could be removed from the table for the first time. What the Trump White House has done so far is absolutely amazing. I believe we can expect several more steps of pressure, both when it comes to the negotiation and the military presence, that will ultimately lead us to the change that we need. a change of regime in Iran, or a military strike that promotes that type of change. That's my personal prayer, that's my personal belief and hope for the people of Iran and the stability of this region. Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.